I never thought I'd be writing something like this on Reddit, but I need to get this off my chest. It's been 6 months since my divorce was finalized, and I think I am finally ready to share what happened. Maybe typing it all out will help me process everything. Or maybe some of you can tell me if I am crazy for feeling the way I do. My ex-wife, Sarah, and I were married for 7 years. We met in college, dated for 2 years, got married, and settled down in a nice suburban area. I am a contractor who runs my own business, and she works in marketing. We had what I thought was a good life. No kids yet, but we were talking about it. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I never saw what was coming. About a year ago, Sarah mentioned that her company had hired a new marketing director. Imagine my surprise when she came home and told me it was my cousin Mike. We weren't super close growing up. He's a few years older and we lived in different states. But we always got along at family gatherings. I thought it was a cool coincidence and was actually happy about it. I figured having family at her workplace might make things more comfortable for her. The first few weeks seemed normal. Sarah would occasionally mention Mike in passing, how he was adjusting to the new role, some project they were working on, nothing that raised any red flags. Then I started noticing she was staying at work later. Not dramatically at first, just an hour here and there. She said they were launching a new campaign and things were hectic. Then came the weekend work sessions. Mike and the team need to meet on Saturday to finish the quarterly presentation, she'd say. Or, I am going to grab coffee with Mike to discuss the new client pitch. I didn't think twice about it. I trusted her completely, and he was family. How stupid was I? I started noticing subtle changes in her behavior. She was more protective of her phone, always keeping it face down or taking it with her even if she just left the room for a minute. She started putting more effort into her appearance before work, new outfits, spending more time on her makeup, wearing perfume I had bought her but she rarely used before. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and found her side of the bed empty. I walked out to the living room and saw her sitting in the dark, texting someone. When she noticed me, she quickly put the phone down and said she couldn't sleep and was just checking work emails. But I caught a glimpse of her screen. It wasn't her email app open. "Who are you texting at this hour?" I asked. "Just Mike about the presentation tomorrow," she said too quickly. "We not ready," and he's freaking out a bit. I nodded and went back to bed, but something didn't sit right. The next morning, I casually asked about the presentation, and she looked momentarily confused before covering it up with some vague explanation. That's when I first felt that sinking feeling in my stomach. The one that tells you something is very wrong, but your brain isn't ready to accept it yet. I started paying more attention to the patterns, how she mentioned Mike's name and then quickly changed the subject, how she get this look in her eyes when her phone chimed with a notification. After a particularly late night at the office, she came home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. When I hugged her, I noticed it right away, but I didn't say anything. I was still in denial, still making excuses in my head. Maybe she hugged a male colleague as a goodbye. Maybe it was just from being in a conference room with other people all day. But deep down, I knew. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. The next few weeks were torture. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that I should trust my wife, but the evidence was piling up. Sarah started going to team happy hours at least twice a week. She'd come home late, slightly tipsy, and immediately jump in the shower. When I suggest joining one of these happy hours to meet her coworkers and see Mike, she'd always have an excuse. It's just for the marketing team, or you'd be bored with all the shop talk. One night, I decided to check our phone bill. We shared a family plan, and I had never bothered to look at the detailed call logs before. What I found made my stomach drop. Dozens of calls between Sarah and Mike, many late at night or early in the morning. Hundreds of text messages. And on days when she claimed to be working late, there would be long gaps with no messages or calls, as if they didn't need to communicate because they were together. I confronted her that night. Not directly about Mike, but about the late nights and the secretive behavior. "Do you think I am stupid?" I asked her after dinner. "What are you talking about?" She looked genuinely confused, but there was something else in her eyes. "Fear? You never home anymore. You always with the team, or at the office. I feel like I am living with a stranger." Her expression shifted from confusion to anger so quickly it was jarring. So that's what this is about. You upset that I am focusing on my career? I thought you supported me. This campaign is huge for us, and Mike is counting on me to deliver. Mike again, I said quietly. What's that supposed to mean? Her voice had an edge to it now. Nothing, I replied. I just find it interesting how often his name comes up. She exploded. He's my boss, for God's sake. And he's your cousin. What are you implying? I backed down, apologized, said I was just missing spending time with her. She softened a bit, promised we'd have a date night that weekend. But the date night never happened. Friday afternoon, she called to say there was an emergency with the campaign, and she had to work late. That was it. I decided I needed to know for sure. The following Monday, Sarah left for work at her usual time, 7:30 a.m. She kissed me goodbye, said she might be late again because they had a client dinner. I waited 10 minutes, then got in my car and followed her. I felt sick doing it, like I was violating some sacred trust. But I needed answers, and I wasn't getting them from her. I kept a safe distance behind, grateful for the morning traffic that made it easier to blend in. To my surprise, she didn't take her usual route to the office. Instead, she pulled into a coffee shop parking lot about halfway there. I parked across the street, heart pounding. 5 minutes later, another car pulled up beside hers. Mike's car. I recognized it from the family gatherings. They didn't get out. Instead, Sarah got into his car, and they drove off together. I followed them, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. They didn't go to the office. Instead, they drove to a diner about 20 minutes in the opposite direction of their workplace. Through the window, I could see them sitting close in a booth, laughing, their hands occasionally touching across the table. At one point, he leaned over and kissed her, not a quick peck, but the kind of kiss you don't give your coworker or your cousin's wife. I took pictures with my phone, feeling like I might throw up. Then I drove home and called in sick to work. I spent the day in a daze, looking at those photos over and over, trying to convince myself there was some innocent explanation. There wasn't. When Sarah came home that night, I acted normal. Asked about her day. She gave me a detailed account of meetings and client calls, all lies. I nodded and smiled, dying inside. That night, I made a decision. I needed to see how deep this went. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed to follow them again. For the next few days, I lived in a strange limbo. I knew Sarah was cheating, but I hadn't confronted her yet. I needed more. Maybe I was torturing myself, or maybe I just needed to be absolutely certain before blowing up my life. Either way, I decided to follow them again. Sarah had told me she had an early meeting on Thursday, so she need to leave by 6:30 a.m. This was new. Her usual early meetings weren't before 8 o'clock. I pretended to be half asleep when she kissed me goodbye, mumbling something about seeing her that evening. As soon as I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I jumped up, threw on clothes, and rushed out to follow her. This time, she drove directly to the same coffee shop as before. Mike was already there, waiting in his car. She parked, got into his vehicle, and they drove off. I followed, maintaining a safe distance, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. They drove for about 30 minutes, heading toward the outskirts of town, where the buildings got shabbier and the businesses more sparse. Finally, they pulled into the parking lot of a place called the Starlight Motel, one of those rundown places that rents rooms by the hour. The kind of place no legitimate business meeting would ever happen. I parked across the street at a gas station, watching as Mike went to the office while Sarah waited in the car. He came back with a key, and they walked to room 118, looking around furtively before entering. The door closed behind them, and the curtains were drawn immediately. I sat there staring at that door, feeling like someone had ripped my heart out. There was no business emergency. There was no early meeting. There was just my wife and my cousin, sneaking off to a sleazy motel on a Thursday morning. I don't know how long I sat there, maybe an hour, maybe more. I thought about storming in there, catching them in the act. I thought about calling Sarah's phone, just to hear her lie again. I thought about driving my car through the motel room wall. But in the end, I just sat and watched, documenting everything with timestamps and photos on my phone. When they finally emerged around 9:30 a.m., they were disheveled but smiling. Mike kissed her deeply in the parking lot before they got into separate cars, her to go to work, him to who knows where. I took more pictures, each click of my phone's camera feeling like a stab to my gut. I followed Sarah to her office, watched her walk in like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just betrayed me in the most painful way possible. Then I drove home and opened a bottle of whiskey. By noon, I was drunk and furious, but still not ready to confront her. I needed a plan. I spent the day alternating between rage, grief, and calculating coldness. I looked up divorce lawyers. I thought about how to gather more evidence. I even considered calling my parents or friends, but the shame was too much. My wife was sleeping with my cousin. How could I tell anyone that? When Sarah came home that evening, she found me on the couch, the now empty whiskey bottle on the coffee table. "Jesus, what happened to you?" she asked, her face a perfect mask of concern. "Bad day," I mumbled, watching her closely. "Want to talk about it?" She sat beside me, put her hand on my knee. I fought the urge to recoil from her touch. "How was your meeting this morning?" I asked instead. She didn't miss a beat. "Productive. We're making progress on the campaign." "That's good," I said, my voice flat. "And how's Mike?" There it was, the tiniest flicker in her eyes. Fear, quickly masked by casual indifference. "Fine, I guess." "Why?" "Just asking about family," I said with a shrug. "Haven't seen him in a while." She relaxed visibly. "He's good. Busy with work. You should call him sometime." The audacity of that suggestion made me want to scream, but I just nodded and said I might do that. Then I excused myself to go throw up in the bathroom, the combination of whiskey and betrayal making me physically ill. That night, I made my decision. I wouldn't confront them yet. I would gather more evidence, build an irrefutable case, and then I would blow their world apart. The next day was Friday. Sarah told me she'd be working late again. Another client dinner that would probably run until 10 or so. I nodded, said I understood, told her to have a good time. I even managed to kiss her goodbye without showing my disgust. If she was going to lie to my face, I could put on an act too. I had done some research the night before. I knew that the Starlight Motel charged $75 for their afternoon special from 2 to 6 p.m. I guessed they'd be taking advantage of that, meeting right after work before their supposed client dinner. I called a buddy and asked if I could borrow his truck for the day. I didn't want Sarah or Mike to recognize my car. Then I packed a small bag with my phone, fully charged, a small digital camera with better zoom than my phone, and a bottle of water. I was going stakeout. I parked in the same gas station as before, positioned so I could see the motel entrance and parking lot. Then I waited. At 4:37 p.m., Mike's car pulled in. At 4:43 p.m., Sarah arrived. They did the same routine. Mike got the key from the office, then they both hurried to room 118. Same room as before. They were creatures of habit, I'll give them that. This time, I didn't just sit and watch. I had a plan. I waited about 15 minutes, enough time for them to get comfortable. Then I walked across the street to the motel. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. The motel had those old-style doors that opened directly to the outside. Room 118 was on the ground floor, around the back. I approached quietly, listening. I could hear muffled voices, then laughter. Her laughter. It cut through me like a knife. I had two options. I could knock and confront them, or I could try something else. I chose the latter. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah. "Hey babe, how's the client dinner going? Miss you." I heard her phone chime inside the room. There was a pause in conversation, then I heard her say, "It's him. Give me a second." A moment later, my phone buzzed with her reply. "Going great. Just appetizers so far. Client seems impressed. Miss you too. Don't wait up XO." I took a screenshot of our exchange, then put my phone away. I stood there for a moment, listening to them resume whatever they were doing, feeling cold rage wash over me. Then I walked around to the front office. The clerk was a bored-looking guy in his 50s, watching a baseball game on a small TV. I approached the counter and cleared my throat. "Can I help you?" he asked, barely looking away from the game. "I need to get into room 118, I said. "My wife's in there." He glanced at me, suddenly more interested. "Name on the registration?" "Mike Johnson," I guessed, using Mike's last name. He checked his records and nodded. "ID?" I showed him my driver's license. The last name matched since Mike was my cousin. "Look," I said, leaning in. "I know my wife is in there with another man." I just want to confirm it so I can file for divorce. I won't cause a scene, I promise. He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. Been there, buddy. Wait here. He disappeared into a back room and returned with a master key. I am going on break for 10 minutes. This key somehow ended up on the counter while I was gone. When I get back, I expect it to be right here where I didn't leave it. I thanked him, took the key, and walked back to room 118. I stood outside the door, key in hand, listening. The sounds coming from inside were unmistakable now. They weren't talking anymore. I inserted the key as quietly as possible and turned it. The lock clicked. I took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by the bathroom light. But it was enough to see them, Sarah and Mike, naked on the bed, so engrossed in each other they didn't notice me at first. Her back was to me, but I could see his face over her shoulder, his eyes closed in pleasure. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, pulled out my phone, and took a picture. The flash went off. Sarah screamed and whirled around. Mike scrambled to cover himself with the sheet. What the fuck? She shrieked, grabbing for her clothes. How did you? Hello, Sarah, I said, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. Sorry to interrupt your client dinner. Mike was pale as a ghost. Listen, man, I can explain. Save it, I cut him off. I don't want to hear anything from you. Not one fucking word. Sarah was pulling on her dress, her face a mixture of shock, anger, and, unbelievably, indignation. You followed me? You spied on me? What the hell is wrong with you? I laughed, a hollow sound. What's wrong with me? You re-fucking my cousin in a sleazy motel, and you re-asking what's wrong with me? I took another picture, then turned to leave. Before I did, I looked back at both of them. By the way, I have all the evidence I need now. Enjoy explaining this to everyone we know. I walked out, closing the door behind me, and returned the key to the front desk as promised. The clerk gave me a sympathetic nod but didn't say anything. In my friend's truck, I finally broke down. I sat there shaking, tears streaming down my face. The images of what I'd just seen burned into my brain forever. I drove around for hours after leaving the motel, unable to go home, unable to face the reality of what had just happened. My phone kept buzzing with texts and calls from Sarah, but I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to hear her voice or read whatever lies or excuses she was crafting. Around midnight, I finally went home. I half expected her to be gone, but her car was in the driveway. I sat in my friend's truck for a few minutes, gathering my courage before going inside. Sarah was waiting in the living room, her eyes red and puffy from crying, but her posture rigid with defiance. As soon as I walked in, she started in on me. How dare you humiliate me like that? Following me, breaking into a private room, taking pictures? Do you have any idea how psychotic that is? I stared at her in disbelief. Psychotic? You are calling me psychotic? You've been fucking my cousin behind my back for God knows how long, lying to my face every day, and I am the crazy one? It's not what you think, she said, her voice shifting to something softer, placating. Mike and it just happened. We didn't mean to hurt you. Oh, I am sure it was completely accidental, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You just happened to fall on his dick in a motel room. Repeatedly. On company time, no less. Her face hardened again. You know what? Yes, I slept with Mike. And you know why? Because he sees me. He appreciates me. He doesn't take me for granted like you do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Take you for granted? I supported everything you ever wanted to do. I've been a good husband. A good husband? She scoffed. A good husband would notice when his wife is unhappy. A good husband would pay attention to her needs. When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened? When was the last time you made me feel special? Don't you dare try to justify this, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Don't you dare try to make this my fault. She crossed her arms. It takes two people to ruin a marriage. If you had been more present, more attentive. Stop, I cut her off. Just stop. You don't get to rewrite history to make yourself feel better. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. And with my cousin, of all people. Do you have any idea how fucked up that is? Mike understands me, she said, her chin lifted defiantly. He's there for me emotionally in ways you never were. I laughed bitterly. I am sure that's exactly what he told you while he was unbuttoning your blouse. Classic line. You know what? I am not doing this right now, she said, grabbing her purse. You're clearly not in a place to have a rational conversation. Where are you going? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Out. I need space. To Mike's? I asked. Her hesitation was all the confirmation I needed. Go ahead, I said. Go to him. But don't expect to come back. She paused at the door. What does that mean? It means I want a divorce, I said, the words finally out in the open. It means we're done. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw a flash of panic in her eyes. But it was quickly replaced by cold anger. Fine, she said, if that's what you want. It's not what I want, I replied quietly. It's what you chose when you decided to sleep with my cousin. She didn't respond to that. She just walked out, slamming the door behind her. I heard her car start up and drive away. I sat down on the couch, feeling strangely empty. I had imagined this confrontation so many times in the last few days, had rehearsed what I would say, how I would respond to her excuses. But I never expected her to blame me. I never expected her to act like the victim. I pulled out my phone and looked at the pictures I had taken at the motel. They were brutal, graphic evidence of her betrayal. Part of me wanted to send them to everyone we knew, her parents, our friends, her coworkers. I wanted the world to see her for who she really was. But I didn't. Instead, I called a locksmith and arranged for the locks to be changed first thing in the morning. Then I called a divorce attorney and left a message requesting the earliest possible appointment. That night, I slept in our bed alone, surrounded by her things, her scent still on the pillow next to mine. I wondered where she was, what she was telling Mike, whether they were laughing at me together. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah didn't come home that night, or the next. By Sunday evening, I had changed the locks, contacted a lawyer, and started packing up her things. I wasn't being vindictive. I just couldn't bear to look at her clothes in our closet or her toiletries in our bathroom. Every reminder of her felt like a fresh wound. On Monday morning, I called in sick to work again. I couldn't face clients or employees in my current state. I spent the day meeting with the divorce attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Janet who listened to my story without judgment and laid out my options with clinical precision. You have solid evidence of infidelity, she told me. That can help in negotiations, though Michigan is a no-fault divorce state. But before we file anything, we need to secure your finances. Today, I followed her advice, opening new accounts in just my name, transferring half of our joint savings. I couldn't bring myself to take more, even though Janet suggested I should, and freezing our joint credit cards. I also changed all my passwords and started making a list of shared assets. Around 3 p.m., Sarah finally called. I almost didn't answer, but Janet had advised me to document all communications. You changed the locks, she said without preamble, her voice tight with anger. Yes, I replied simply. That's illegal. You can't lock me out of my own house. Actually, I can. The house is in my name, I reminded her. We had bought it before our marriage, using money from my business. She had never wanted to be on the mortgage because she said it would hurt her credit score. Ironic how that had worked out in my favor. I need to get my things, she demanded. They repacked. You can pick them up tomorrow at 6. Leave them on the porch. You went through my stuff? Her voice rose in indignation. I put your clothes and personal items in boxes, I said flatly. I didn't read your diary, if that's what you worried about. There was a pause. We need to talk about this like adults. We tried that. You blamed me for your decision to sleep with my cousin. That's not, she started, then sighed. Look, I admit I handled this badly. But you're not innocent here. Our marriage was broken long before Mike came into the picture. I felt a surge of anger. Keep telling yourself that if it helps you sleep at night. But we both know the truth. The truth is complicated, she insisted. I wasn't happy. I tried to tell you so many times, but you never listened. Mike was there for me when you weren't. Save it for someone who cares, I said. They already contacted a lawyer. You should do the same. There was a long silence on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was softer, almost vulnerable. Do you really want to end 7 years just like that? Don't we at least owe it to ourselves to try counseling? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Counseling? You want to go to counseling after I caught you in bed with my cousin? Are you serious right now? People make mistakes, she said. Even terrible ones. But marriages can survive affairs if both people are committed to healing. This wasn't a mistake, Sarah. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk or double booking dinner plans. You made a deliberate choice, day after day, to betray me in the worst possible way. I never meant to hurt you, she said, and I thought I heard genuine remorse in her voice. For a fleeting moment, my resolve wavered. But you did, I replied quietly. And you can't undo it. So that's it? You throwing away everything we built together? I am not the one who threw it away, I said. You did that when you decided my cousin was more important than our marriage vows. It wasn't like that, she protested. Then what was it like, Sarah? Explain it to me. Make me understand how fucking my cousin behind my back was somehow not a betrayal. She didn't have an answer for that. After a moment, she said, fine. I'll pick up my things tomorrow. But this conversation isn't over. Yes, it is, I said, and hung up. I sat there staring at the phone, feeling strangely calm. I had expected to feel more during that conversation. More anger, more pain, more doubt. But all I felt was a sense of clarity. Our marriage was over. It had been over the moment she decided to cheat, whether I knew it then or not. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It was Mike. We need to talk, cousin to cousin. I owe you an explanation. I stared at the message for a long time before typing my response. The only thing you owe me is to stay the hell out of my life. You dead to me. I blocked his number without waiting for a reply. Then I poured myself a drink and raised it in a bitter toast to the ruins of my marriage and family. Word travels fast in families. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts from relatives who had somehow heard about Sarah and Mike. I ignored most of them, only responding to my parents to assure them I was handling things and would fill them in later. As promised, Sarah came to pick up her things at 6 p.m. I made sure to be out of the house, leaving the boxes neatly stacked on the porch with a note saying I'd send the rest once I had time to sort through everything. I didn't want to see her, didn't want another confrontation or, worse, another attempt at justification. When I returned home an hour later, the boxes were gone. She left her house key on top of the welcome mat, a small gesture of acknowledgement that this was no longer her home. It should have felt like a victory, but it just felt empty. The next day, I was at the office trying to catch up on work when my phone rang. It was my Aunt Judy, Mike's mother. I almost didn't answer, but she was essentially the matriarch of our extended family, and ignoring her would only make things worse. Hello, Aunt Judy, I said, bracing myself. Oh, David, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I just heard what happened. I am so sorry. Her sincere tone caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness, maybe even blame, but not this unconditional support. Mike came to us last night, she continued. He confessed everything. I've never been so ashamed of my son in my life. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part felt terrible for her. She wasn't responsible for her adult son's choices. How are you holding up? She asked when I didn't respond. I am surviving, I answered honestly. Taking it day by day. I want you to know that we're here for you, she said firmly. What Michael did was unforgivable. He betrayed not just you, but this entire family. Your Uncle Jim hasn't said 2 words to him since he found out. Again, I was surprised. I had assumed the family would close ranks around Mike, that blood would be thicker than marriage vows. But Aunt Judy was making it clear where they stood. Thank you, I managed. That means a lot. We'd like to see you, if you re-up for it, she said. Not right away, of course. But when you ready. You still our family, David. That hasn't changed. After hanging up, I sat at my desk fighting back tears. Their support made the loss of Sarah and Mike both better and worse somehow. Later that evening, I was trying to distract myself with mindless TV when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sarah standing there, looking tired and unusually disheveled. I forgot a few things, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I stepped aside silently to let her in. She walked past me into the house, her familiar perfume triggering a wave of memories I wasn't prepared for. What did you forget? I asked, keeping my distance. My mother's jewelry box from the guest room closet. And there are some financial documents in the filing cabinet I need. I nodded. Go ahead. She moved through the house with the comfort of someone who had lived there for years, which of course she had. I watched her from the doorway, feeling like I was observing a stranger. How's Mike? I asked suddenly, surprising myself with the question. She froze, then turned to face me. Not. I am not staying with him, if that's what you asking. That genuinely surprised me. Trouble in paradise already? Her face hardened. Don't what? Don't point out the irony that you blew up our marriage for a relationship that didn't even last a week? It's more complicated than that, she said, turning away to continue her search. It always is with you, isn't it? I replied. Nothing is ever simple, nothing is ever your fault. She found the jewelry box and clutched it to her chest like a shield. This was a mistake. I should have asked you to mail these things. Probably, I agreed, but then you wouldn't have had the chance to check if I was falling apart without you. Her eyes snapped to mine, a flash of guilt confirming my suspicion. Well, I hate to disappoint you, I continued, but I am doing just fine. Better than expected, actually. Good for you, she said, her voice brittle. I am glad one of us is. For the first time, I really looked at her. The dark circles under her eyes, the uncombed hair, the rumpled clothes. Sarah, who was always put together, always in control, looked like she was coming apart at the seams. What happened with Mike? I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. She sighed, seeming to deflate a little. His family found out. They not speaking to him. And they called my parents. So that was it. The consequences were catching up to her. My mom cried for hours, she continued, her voice small. My dad said he didn't raise me to be that kind of woman. I felt a twinge of sympathy despite myself. I knew how much her parents' approval meant to her. What did you expect, Sarah? That everyone would just accept what you and Mike did? I don't know what I expected, she admitted. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just unhappy. And now? Now I am staying at a hotel. My family is disgusted with me, and they probably destroyed my career. She laughed, a hollow sound. So I guess I got what I deserved, right? Isn't that what you think? I considered her question seriously. I don't know if it's about deserving. Actions have consequences. We both have to live with yours. She nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for hurting you. You didn't deserve that. It was the first genuine apology she offered, without qualifications or deflections or attempts to share the blame. But it was too little, too late. Thank you for saying that, I said. But it doesn't change anything. She nodded again, understanding. I know. The days turned into weeks. The divorce proceedings moved forward methodically, impersonal legal language reducing 7 years of marriage to assets and liabilities to be divided. Janet, my attorney, was ruthlessly efficient, ensuring I was protected at every turn. Sarah had hired her own lawyer, but her heart didn't seem to be in the fight. She agreed to most of Janet's terms with minimal pushback, which made the process faster but somehow sadder. I tried to keep myself busy with work, throwing myself into projects that had languished during my marital crisis. I reconnected with friends I neglected, started going to the gym regularly, even joined a divorce support group at Janet's recommendation. On the surface, I was doing all the right things to heal and move on. But inside, I was hollow. I went through the motions of living without really feeling alive. The betrayal had carved something essential out of me, trust, maybe, or hope. Whatever it was, its absence was like a phantom limb, always making itself known by the pain of not being there. Then came the Wednesday that changed everything again. I was at the office late, catching up on paperwork, when my cell phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but some instinct made me pick up. Hello? Is this David? A woman's voice, vaguely familiar but I couldn't place it. Yes. Who's this? It's Amanda. From Mike's office? Now I recognized her. She was the receptionist at the marketing firm where Mike and Sarah worked. I met her a few times at company parties. Amanda. Hi, what can I do for you? I tried to keep my voice neutral, though my mind was racing with possibilities. I am sorry to call you like this, she said, her voice low and rushed like she was afraid of being overheard. But I thought you should know. Sarah just left the office with a bunch of her things. She was crying. And earlier, she and Mike had this huge fight in his office. Everyone could hear them. I appreciate the information, I said carefully, but Sarah and I are getting divorced. What she does isn't really my concern anymore. That's not. She paused, then continued more urgently. Look, she's been acting really strange lately. Erratic. Coming in late, leaving early, crying in the bathroom. And today I overheard her on the phone telling someone she couldn't do this anymore, and that there's no point to any of it. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Are you saying you think she might? I don't know, Amanda admitted. Maybe I am overreacting. But she seemed really out of it, and I know she doesn't have many friends here. Most people at the office have taken Mike's side, even though, well, I know what really happened. I was already grabbing my keys and heading for the door. Do you know where she went? No, but she mentioned something about the lake house to Mike during their fight. Does that mean anything to you? It did. Sarah's parents had a small cabin on Lake Huron. We spent weekends there in the summer, and I knew it was where Sarah went when she needed to think or be alone. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate the call. I hope she's okay, she said. And I am sorry about everything. For what it's worth, a lot of us thought what they did to you was really messed up. I thanked her again and hung up, already in my car and pulling out of the parking lot. The lake house was about 2 hours away. I tried calling Sarah repeatedly as I drove, but each call went straight to voicemail. Why was I doing this? The question echoed in my mind as I sped down the highway. Why should I care if she was falling apart? Hadn't she brought this all on herself? Wasn't this exactly the karma she deserved? But no matter how betrayed I felt, no matter how much anger and hurt still churned inside me, I couldn't ignore the possibility that she might harm herself. Whatever she done, I couldn't have that on my conscience. The sun was setting as I arrived at the lake, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. Sarah's car was parked in front of the cabin, confirming my hunch. I pulled up beside it and sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts. What was I going to say to her? What could I possibly say that would make any difference? I approached the cabin cautiously. Through the window, I could see a figure sitting on the couch, illuminated by a single lamp. Sarah, still in her work clothes, a glass of something, probably wine, in her hand. She was staring blankly at the wall, not reading, not watching TV, just existing. I knocked on the door. No response. I knocked again, louder. Sarah? It's me. Open the door. I heard movement, then her voice, thick with what might have been tears or alcohol or both. David, what are you doing here? Amanda called me. She was worried about you. A bitter laugh. Amanda should mind her own business. She thought you might do something stupid. More movement, then the door opened. Sarah stood there, mascara streaked down her face, eyes red and swollen. The glass in her hand was indeed wine, red, almost empty. Do something stupid? She repeated. Like cheat on my husband with his cousin? That kind of stupid? I sighed. Can I come in, please? She stepped aside wordlessly, and I entered the cabin. It was exactly as I remembered it, rustic, cozy, smelling of pine and the lake. Sarah had always loved it here. It was her happy place. Why are you really here, David? She asked, refilling her glass from a bottle on the coffee table. I noticed it was almost empty as well. Come to gloat? See me at rock bottom? No, I said quietly. I came because despite everything, I don't want to see you hurt. She looked at me skeptically. You don't hate me? I am angry, I admitted. I am hurt. I don't trust you. But no, I don't hate you. I don't think I could ever hate you, even after what you did. Her face crumpled at that, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. You should, she whispered. I hate me. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt my heart break for her. Not for us, not for what we had lost, but for her, this woman I had loved for so long, now so clearly broken. What happened with Mike? I asked, sitting down across from her. She curled into herself on the couch, suddenly looking small and vulnerable. Reality happened. Once it wasn't a secret anymore, once we had to face everyone, it all fell apart. He blamed me for not being more careful. I blamed him for pushing me into the affair in the first place. We just imploded. And work? She laughed that hollow laugh again. I am on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation into inappropriate workplace relationships. They fire me eventually. They just going through the motions. I am sorry, I said, and meant it. Don't TB. I deserve it all. Every bit of it. She took another sip of wine. The thing is, I knew better. I knew it was wrong. I felt so alive with him, you know? After feeling numb for so long. I wanted to ask when she had started feeling numb with me, what I had missed, what I could have done differently. But those questions weren't helpful now. They belonged to a past that couldn't be changed. What are you going to do? I asked instead. She shrugged listlessly. I don't know. Move back home with my parents, I guess. Start over somewhere. If that's even possible. It's possible, I assured her. People make mistakes, even terrible ones. Life goes on. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since I arrived. Why are you being so kind to me? After everything I did? I considered her question carefully. Because being cruel won't undo what happened. It won't make me feel better. And whatever else has changed between us, I did love you once. That has to count for something. Fresh tears filled her eyes. I never deserved you, she whispered. Not even at the beginning. I stayed at the lake house with Sarah until she sobered up enough that I felt comfortable leaving her alone. We talked for hours, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. No accusations, no defensiveness, just raw honesty about what had gone wrong between us. I felt invisible, she confessed, curled up on the opposite end of the couch. Like I was just part of the furniture in your life. Present but not seen. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. I tried, but you were always so busy with work, so focused on building your business. And when you were home, you were still mentally at the office. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I forced myself to really consider her words. Had I been that disconnected? That oblivious? That doesn't excuse what I did, she continued, as if reading my thoughts. I could have tried harder to make you understand. I could have suggested counseling. I could have left cleanly if I was that unhappy. Instead, I took the coward's way out. And Mike? How did that start? She sighed deeply. It was gradual. He would listen to me complain about work, then about life, then about our marriage. He made me feel heard, valued, and he started saying things like, if you were my wife, I'd never take you for granted, and you deserve better. Classic predator moves, but I was too flattered to see it. He pursued you, then? Something about that made it marginally less painful. The thought that she hadn't been the instigator. Yes, but I let myself be pursued. I knew what was happening. I knew it was wrong. She looked at me directly. That's the part one can't forgive myself for. Not the affair itself, but the lying. The sneaking around, making you think you were crazy when you started to suspect something was off. By the time I left around midnight, we had reached a kind of peace, not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. I promised to have Janet ease up on some of the divorce terms, and she promised to see a therapist to work through her issues. We agreed to keep things civil for the sake of our shared history, if nothing else. As I drove home under a canopy of stars, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The pain was still there, the betrayal still raw, but it no longer consumed me. For the first time, I could imagine a future where this terrible chapter was just that. A chapter, not the whole story of my life. The next day, I was back at work when my phone buzzed with a text. It was Mike. I need to talk to you. Please, just 10 minutes. My first instinct was to ignore it, but after the conversation with Sarah, I was curious about his side of the story. Against my better judgment, I replied, Walker's Pub, 7 p.m. You get 5 minutes. I arrived at the pub intentionally late, making him wait. He was sitting at a corner table, nursing a beer, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Good. Thanks for coming, he said as I sat down, not offering my hand. Your 5 minutes started when I walked in the door, I replied coldly. He nodded, accepting my terms. I know nothing I say will make this right. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. Skip the preamble, I cut in. What do you want? He took a deep breath. I want you to know it wasn't Sarah's fault. I pursued her. I manipulated her. I saw she was vulnerable and I exploited that. I studied him carefully. That's very noble of you, taking all the blame. But Sarah's a grown woman who made her own choices. Of course she did, he acknowledged. I am not saying she's blameless. But I was the one who crossed the line first. I was the one who kept pushing even when she tried to end it. She tried to end it? This was news to me. Mike nodded. Twice. Once about a month in, and again right before you found us. She was racked with guilt. She said she couldn't keep hurting you. But she did keep hurting me, I pointed out. For months. Because I wouldn't let her go, he admitted. I threatened to tell you myself if she ended things. I told her I'd make sure everyone at work knew she was the one who initiated it. I blackmailed her, essentially. I felt a surge of anger, not just at the affair but at this new revelation. You telling me you coerced her into continuing the affair? That's not just betrayal, Mike. That's borderline criminal. He couldn't meet my eyes. I know. I was obsessed with her. Have been since college, actually. Since college? I repeated, confused. You barely knew Sarah in college. I knew her, he said quietly. I was 2 years ahead of you, remember? We had a class together her freshman year. I asked her out, but she turned me down. Then a few months later, she started dating you. The pieces were falling into place now. So this whole thing, getting a job at her company, pursuing her, it was all some twisted form of revenge? Some sick way to finally get the girl who rejected you. Not consciously, he said, but his face told a different story. At least, I didn't think of it that way at the time. But looking back, maybe some part of me wanted to prove I could take her from you. You pathetic, I said, disgusted. And you a liar. Sarah told me you blamed her when it all blew up, that you said she should have been more careful. He winced. I did say that. I was scared and angry and, yes, I lashed out at her. But I am telling you the truth now. For whatever that's worth. It's worth nothing, I said flatly. You destroyed my marriage, betrayed your family, and nearly drove Sarah to a breakdown. And for what? Some twisted college grudge? I am not asking for forgiveness, he said. I know I don't deserve it. I just thought you should know the whole story. I stood up, having heard enough. Stay away from me. Stay away from Sarah. If I ever see you again, I want to be responsible for my actions. He nodded, accepting this. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Save it, I replied. Your 5 minutes are up. I walked out of the pub, my mind reeling with this new information. Had Sarah known about Mike's past interest in her? Had she been manipulated even more than she realized? And did any of it actually matter now that our marriage was over? I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. You okay? Amanda told me you and Mike were meeting tonight. I typed back. I am fine. We need to talk tomorrow. There's more to the story than either of us knew. Her reply came quickly. I am listening when you ready. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized. 6 months of rebuilding my life piece by piece, of learning who I am outside of the relationship that defined me for so long. I like to say it's been a smooth journey, but healing rarely is. After my meeting with Mike, Sarah and I had one final, honest conversation. I told her everything he had revealed. His obsession with her since college, his deliberate manipulation, the blackmail. She was shocked by some of it, confirmed other parts. Yes, he had threatened to tell me and ruin her reputation if she ended things. No, she hadn't known about his interest in her from years before. Yes, she had tried to break it off twice, but ultimately, she admitted, she could have tried harder. She could have called his bluff. She could have told me herself. It doesn't excuse what I did, she said, echoing her words from the lake house. But maybe it helps explain it. It did, in a way. Not enough to save our marriage. That damage was irreparable, but enough to allow me to let go of some of the anger, some of the pain. Enough to find closure. The divorce proceeded without further drama. Janet negotiated terms that were fair to both of us, and Sarah didn't contest anything. She moved back to her hometown, took a job at a smaller marketing firm, started fresh. We keep in minimal contact, occasional texts to tie up loose ends, brief updates on major life changes. Cordial but distant, like acquaintances who share a complicated history. As for Mike, he faced his own consequences. After I shared what he told me with Aunt Judy, the family cut him off completely. He was asked to resign from his position at the marketing firm due to the inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. Last I heard, he moved to California to start over. Good riddance. I stayed in our house, though I redecorated to make it feel like mine instead of ours. I buried myself in work at first, the classic coping mechanism of the heartbroken man. But gradually, with the help of therapy and good friends, I started to emerge from the shell of pain and betrayal. 2 months ago, I went on my first date since the divorce. Amanda, of all people, the receptionist who had called me that night, worried about Sarah. We had kept in touch after everything imploded, first as friendly acquaintances comparing notes on the workplace fallout, then as actual friends. The transition to something more happened naturally, without pressure or expectation. She knows everything, about Sarah, about Mike, about my trust issues and occasional bouts of insecurity. She's patient with the baggage I carry, but she doesn't let me use it as an excuse to push her away. Your past doesn't define you, she reminds me when I get stuck in old patterns of thinking. It's just part of your story. I am not naive enough to think that love fixes everything, or that jumping into a new relationship erases the scars of the old one. Trust comes harder to me now. I find myself checking Amanda's phone when she's in the shower, then hating myself for the impulse. I panic when she works late or goes out with friends without me. But I am working on it. And more importantly, I am talking about it. With her, with my therapist, even with a few close friends. The problems in my marriage weren't just Sarah's infidelity. They were also my emotional distance, my workaholism, my failure to really see when she was unhappy. I am determined not to repeat those mistakes. Last week, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop in the city. She was there visiting her sister, she explained. I was there meeting a client. We chatted awkwardly for a few minutes. Yes, she was doing well. Yes, the new job was going great. Yes, she had heard through the family grapevine that I was seeing someone new. I am happy for you, she said, and seemed to mean it. You deserve someone who appreciates you. You deserve happiness too, I replied, surprised to find I meant it as well. As we parted ways, she hesitated, then asked, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me completely? I considered her question carefully. I think forgiveness is a process, not a destination, I finally said. But I am farther along that road than I ever thought I'd be. She nodded, understanding. That's fair. More than fair, really. Take care of yourself, Sarah, I said. You too, David. And that was it. No drama, no tearful reconciliation, no bitter recriminations. Just two people who once loved each other, now moving in different directions. I want to pretend I am completely healed. There are still nights when I lie awake, replaying events in my mind, wondering what I could have done differently. There are still moments when something triggers a memory and the pain feels as fresh as the day I first discovered their betrayal. But those moments are fewer and further between now. The pain has dulled from a searing agony to a gentle ache, present but no longer debilitating. If there's anything I've learned from this whole sordid experience, it's that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It changes you, yes. How could it not? But whether that change breaks you or transforms you is ultimately your choice. I choose transformation. I choose to learn from the past without being trapped by it. I choose to trust again, even knowing the risks. I choose to believe that one person's actions don't determine the trustworthiness of all people. Most of all, I choose to keep moving forward. Because life doesn't end with betrayal. It just takes a different path than the one you planned. And sometimes, if you brave enough to follow that new path, you might find something, or someone, worth the journey. Edit. Thank you all for the supportive comments and messages. Writing this out has been therapeutic, and knowing others have gone through similar experiences and come out the other side gives me hope. For those asking, yes, Amanda knows I posted this, and yes, we're still taking things slow. One day at a time, right? Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed it and learned from it. I appreciate your likes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and comment on the video. See you soon.